This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Monday, April the 1st. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams. Back in the producer's chair, you'll be speaking with Dave when you pick up the phone to give us a shout and in the queue and on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM. Which is 86-26, so the snow took a pretty severe cutting here in the metro region over the weekend. Certainly welcome sight for yours truly. And one of the favourite pastimes for some, not for me, but it's pretty popular in my neighbourhood, is shoveling the lawn. I've never really quite understood the thirst to get all that last bit of snow off the lawn, but it's a popular activity in and around where I live. All right, let's check in on the Herder Memorial Championships. First two games took place over the weekend out in CBS. The Deer Lake Red Wings visiting to play against the St. John's Caps. Pretty good games. Now, the Caps won both. Bit of a misleading score in game number 2, so the Caps up 2-0 in the finals for the Herder. Now, some consternation out there about how much it costs to go to the game, which is $20. It's long been $20 to go to a Herder game, but even to watch the webcast, $10. So a bit of concerns out there. Good luck and safe travels to all hands participating in the Easter Hockey League tournaments, the All Newfoundlands. Go get them. Check in at Guzhou over in Switzerland at the World Championships. 3-0, or they're 3-0. Now, they worked hard to get a win over Czechia in extra innings, but they beat Germany. Then they beat defending champions Scotland yesterday. They've got the top-ranked team in the world, Italy, today. So good luck to Team Canada, Team Guzhou at the Worlds. All right, and this is a really good one. So, do you follow any rugby, especially do you watch sevens? Of course, when you watch, say, the World Cup of Rugby, you'll see 15 players per side on the pitch. There's also a variety called sevens. And one of the preeminent sevens rugby tournaments in the world is called the Hong Kong Sevens. It takes place from April 5th to the 7th, the 30th anniversary of the tournament. Making his international debut for Team Canada in the Hong Kong Sevens, Jack McCarthy from St. John's. Now, sevens is a especially speedy game, and Jack McCarthy has blinding speed, so congratulations to McCarthy as he makes his debut for Canada. We're in the Pool A against Australia, Fiji and France. No easy pickings there. Anyway, good luck. And I don't know if you're watching any baseball, but the great story about Mary Browns and their partnership with the Blue Jays and their presence at the Rogers Centre in Toronto, they are eclipsing all of their sales forecasts, and that's really, obviously well received by people who go to the ball games, but now it looks like people asking for a Mary Browns franchise to come to where they live because they had their first feed of a Big Mary or taters, or the chicken in the batter's box as they call it. So they've got 280 stores across Canada. They just opened a location in the UK. They're working on one in Mexico and other international destinations for Mary Brown's, local company, knocking it out of the park. Congratulations. All right, in the J split in Tampa Bay, which is also a pretty good result. Lots going on. So yesterday marked the 50th anniversary of the Labrador flag, which is absolutely a beautiful flag. Now, 50 years later, first unveiled by Mike Martin, who was originally from Cartwright, designed back in 1974. He was representing the new Labrador Party in the House of Assembly. The flag is really quite beautiful. So the sprig of black spruce, paired with the iconic stripes of blue, green and white. It's flown all over Labrador at points of entry and otherwise, but all these years later, not still recognized as an official flag of Labrador, but folks in the region obviously quite proud of that particular flag. And, of course, the 75th anniversary of Confederation. There's been lots of debate over the decades about the ups, the downs, the goods, the bads, about being part of Canada. I'm a proud Canadian, but what was a very popular sentiment on social media over the weekend was, yes, proud to be Canadian, but a Newfoundlander and Labradorian first, which is quite understandable and exactly how I feel myself. So when we look at the past 3/4 of a century as part of Canada, and people were harking back to all the confusion and some of the chaos and maybe the mistrust or distrust and the eventual vote that went to bed on the March the 31st, spoke up as a Canadian on the 1st of April. One of the real key issues that I think we can all agree upon is that one serious issue that we've lost when we talk about our relationship with Canada is inside the fishery. So the woeful mismanagement over the decades has come to our shores in really negative terms, negative impacts. The way the fishery has been used as a diplomatic bargaining tool has been to our collective detriment. The amount of fish that is taken from our waters by international fleets has long been a point of concern and fury and woe. And of course, when you look at organizations like NAFO, toothless, not even based here, and if some of the percentage of whatever, you just pick a species, turbot, the amount of turbot that's taken out of the water here by local fishers pales in comparison to what's taken by international fleets. So while we wait for the legal document to be presented sometime this week regarding the deal struck between the protesters, the FFAW, and the provincial government, outside buyers looking at expanding processing capacity, you know all the deal. So that's one area that's really been a downside. I think overall, in my personal opinion, being part of Canada has absolutely been the right play for us. And what the future might have looked like had that vote not been successful back in 1949 is anybody's guess. But if you want to take it on, we can talk about 3/4 of a century as part of the country of Canada, if you are so inclined. And of course, April the 1st, boy, there's a lot going on. So we woke up this morning with an additional carbon tax to be paid on fuels. And we all know some of the numbers that are kicking around. On the price of gasoline, up to 17 cents per litre of gasoline, 21 cents per litre of diesel, 15 cents per cubic metre of natural gas. So the carbon tax is up. 7 premiers around the country were asking the Prime Minister to press the pause button. The Prime Minister fights back saying, well, if this is not the right play to combat climate change, what are your alternatives? In this province, the Premier points out that, the entire landmass of Newfoundland and Labrador is 3 times the Maritimes combined, and we do have infrastructure needs that need to be tended to if you're talking about electric vehicles, what have you. We're the 3rd largest producer of hydroelectricity in the country, and yet we are seeing this impact. Along with the carbon tax. And, it's been a poorly rounded conversation would be my suggestion. So anytime someone mentions climate change, the only conversation that stems from it, carbon tax. Now that we know that there's been a 3-year carve-out of carbon tax on home heating fuels, the rebate that you got last year has decreased for this year. So it went from $164 quarterly last year to $149 in this province. A family of 4 receives $298 quarterly. There's a 10% top-up for those living in rural Canada, and there's the possibility that legislation will be passed to see the rural top-up be doubled. But we don't generally include the rebate in the tax implication itself. And the comment will be, and the questions do sound like this. If the suggestion is, whatever the number is, 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 6 out of 10 Canadians get back more than they pay on carbon tax, and that can indeed be true for many people, depending on your life circumstance. But if we're getting the rebate, then why taxes in the first place? And I suppose when we talk about pressure of price and market influences, then it's the upfront additional cost that may change people's behaviour or habits. I don't know if it's done anything for you, but if you want to take it on from any angle, we can do it. So when they talk about alternatives, the blunt mechanism that people say, well, let's lean on technology or innovation. Okay, but those who pledge that, because these parties agree that something needs to be done, the question is what? So if you're talking tech, what do you actually mean? Is that a carbon capture, carbon sequestration? What are we talking about? Are we putting a more of a heightened focus on the large emitters? Because they have an output mechanism in place as opposed to how we get taxed as regular everyday citizens. In addition, for those who are saying axe the tax, popular slogan, there's a huge percentage of Canadians would like to see some relief when it comes to the carbon tax. There's some implications that have not been thoroughly flushed out. For starters, as an exporting nation and the relationship we have with the European Union, come the end of next year, if there's not a price on carbon charged when we create these goods for export, there's the likelihood that we're going to have to pay a carbon tariff to get our goods into the European Union. So at some point, someone's going to have to explain to me how that's going to work and whether or not that's going to really be to the detriment of those exporting their goods to the European Union, of which there's 27 countries. So, pardon me. I didn't mean to say that. So there's going to be a tariff on the other end, which could indeed impact trade. That has not been part of the conversation. There's a lot that's been left out of that conversation, but the carbon tax is up this morning. You know what else is up? The rate of pay for members of Parliament. Again, just for a reminder, today they're going to get a raise of $8,500 for a backbencher. So the salary now over $200,000. The minister's salary, $299,000. The Prime Minister goes up to $406,200. All right. What else goes up today? The minimum wage goes up from $15 to $15.60. Now, people are absolutely right to say that's a far cry from a living wage. But the minimum wage conversation becomes quite difficult. Because if you have a son or a daughter living in your home, working in a minimum wage job, then that money's probably okay. If you're a mom with a child living on your own at 35 years of age, making minimum wage, the ability to keep the wolf away from the door, I don't know how people do it. So minimum wage is indeed up. They point to things like from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, the suggestion that a livable wage would be around $24 an hour. And again, there is no one-size-fits-all here because it means different things to different people based on their life circumstance and the type of bills that they have to pay each month, whether it be from heat and light or cable or insurance. We'll get to insurance-related matters here in a moment, or car payments or your cell phone, your rent, your mortgage. So, of course, up goes the minimum wage. You want to take it on. Mention of insurance. So the cleanup continues at around Cape St. George. I don't know if you saw the visuals over the weekend, but as a result of the significant rainfall, there was some significant damage. You see the pictures of the culverts being washed away, water rushing through people's homes. In the world of the culverts and infrastructure, we know that some of the aging infrastructure, if you've had a culvert in place around where you live for some 50 years without them having been adjusted, fixed, or replaced, because we know after some of the big weather events, one of the first things we had to attend to is when putting back new culverts, they had to be bigger to be able to handle or accommodate the amount of water that we saw flow through. So does it make sense, as opposed to waiting for this type of devastation, that in addition to road and bridge work, that we have a schedule, even though there has not been the flood yet, but the likelihood of it happening is very real? Should we, as opposed to pay all the money for the cleanup, for individuals, roads washed away and what have you, should it be on the rotational schedule on behalf of the provincial government to start replacing the culverts? Because many of the ones that are out there and they're 40, 50 years old, they're just not big enough. And what happens? You saw the visuals coming from Cape St. George. And in the mention of insurance, you know, I heard the mayor out there talk about the fact that many people who have seen their homes get flooded out do not have insurance. The thought or the comment coming from the mayor is that with all of the other issues regarding cost of living and the bills people have to pay and the price of groceries and everything else and the carbon tax, is that people can't afford the insurance. And if you don't have insurance and you've been hit by this particular weather event and consequential flooding, I feel terrible for you. I guess the question we have to ask ourselves is, can I not afford insurance, or can I not afford not to have insurance? Because one comes with an upfront bill that's pretty steep to pay your premiums. But if you talk about the bill that comes if you don't have insurance for repair or replacement, then boy, oh boy, we're in a different set of circumstances there. All right, how are we doing on the phone there, David? All right, let's keep going. So the Auditor General has said that she and her office will take a look at the contracts inside the healthcare sector. You know, specifically talking about travel nurses. Okay. Now, people will look back at a 5-month window last year where the province spent about $36.5 million on travel nurses. The numbers of travel nurses have come down a little bit, although that has led to still some frustration at the Registered Nurses Union, talking about a couple of things. Knowing that someone who leaves the private travel agency has to wait 12 months before they get hired back into the public rank. Also, that the nurses inside their collective bargaining have not been paid the premium that was negotiated some 8 months later. So there are those frustrations. So it's good that the Auditor General is going to conduct this performance audit. But outside of the private travel agency nurse contract, whether value for money, and it's hard to believe that there was real value for money, even though I don't know how you necessarily measure that, because when the Premier and or the Minister of Health say that, you know, without these nurses brought in, they call them the necessary evil, is that the emergency rooms closed. How do you put a price tag on that? How do you include that into a performance audit? I don't know, but we'll see the terms of reference as Denise Hanrahan comes up with them in the days or weeks or months to come. Should it also include every private sector contract inside of healthcare? Notably, you hear Mike call the program, and he's pretty frustrated, if not furious, about the relationship between the healthcare Health Authority and the Compass Group, for instance. So I would hope that Ms. Hanrahan takes a look at all the private sector contracts inside of the healthcare industry. I shouldn't call it industry, call it a sector. But anyway, you want to talk about that, we can do it. And for those who have long been concerned with the mask mandates in healthcare settings, they have been lifted today as well. Now, inside that word of mandate, I had been in a healthcare setting since February when it was put in place, and they weren't even enforcing it. People were asked to please wear one, and if you're symptomatic today or you're visiting someone who's really quite ill, they're hoping you will wear one. But that mask mandate has been lifted, and it doesn't look like they were really doing much to enforce it in the first place. All right, a couple of quick ones before we get to you. So the premiers in the Atlantic region have written the Prime Minister on a variety of things: infrastructure, housing-related matters, healthcare concerns, pharmacare concerns, and otherwise. So the federal government is now rolling out the first phase of universal pharmacare. And that, of course, is the coverage of the financial costs of contraceptives and diabetes medication. All right. But inside that letter to the Prime Minister, and conversations we've had on this program, there's still lots of ambiguity here. Like, we don't even really truly understand how the universal plan works with provincial plans and or private insurers. They talk about it as if these things have all been settled inside of pharmacare, inside of the National Dental Program, but they haven't been. There's still confusion reigns supreme on those two fronts. So I'm going to get to some of the issues that were broached by the Atlantic premiers in their letter to the Prime Minister, and some of them are really quite big, whether we talk about the cap on international students, which we still don't know how they're going to handle that. A 35% reduction, and the federal minister really kind of misleading by saying it's being brought to bear because of bad actors in the private colleges, when we've now found out that's not necessarily true either. So we can talk about some of those big issues and the concerns that the premiers and individuals have, but if you want to talk about it, we can do it. Oh, with the mask mandate, one thing that we have not moved on, when we figured out that whether we're talking about influenza, the common cold, strep A, COVID, whatever the case may be, is we have not dealt with one important issue here. We'll lean on things like masks, when in fact what's required, in my opinion, is some indoor air quality standards legislation. Inside of building codes, there should be high indoor air quality in all public buildings. There's a report on science.org that talks about people living in urban and industrialized societies spend more than 90% of their time in an indoor environment breathing indoor air. The research is clear. Whether it talks about your overall well-being, productivity, time lost, air quality has been woefully terrible in a lot of public settings, including in schools, including in hospitals, including in government buildings. So that really should be something we move on, because that's a real catch-all. If the air quality is better and it's circulated like it would be in, say, the fuselage of an airplane, that's good for our collective well-being regardless of what we're talking about. There's lots of bugs floating around in the air that you and I share as we spend time in these public buildings. And I think officers should pay close attention to it as well. A HEPA filter allows to stave off some of these illnesses. We know it to be true, and we haven't really acted on it, and I think we should. What do you think? All right, I'm not letting the issues go regarding education. The report we saw last week from the NLTA about the prevalence of violence in school is unbelievable. The issues that we're seeing across the country regarding absenteeism need to be dealt with. The numbers in this province regarding absenteeism are off the charts. Let's get just a couple of numbers for your context as the students and teachers and administrators are home this week. In Newfoundland and Labrador, 2/3 of secondary school students were chronically absent in 2022-23, up from just under half in 18-19. Those are coming from the province's Department of Education. For elementary students, the rate more than doubled, from 23% to 50% over the same period. In high school, there are extraordinary absentee numbers. So I don't know who's going to want to keep this on the front burner, but I surely are. I'm surely planning on it, because success in education is required for long-term sustainability, viability, prosperity in this province and across the country. We're on Twitter or VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. We're going to kick it off with some workers' comp. Michael wants to talk about the Easter Rising event, the anniversary, 75 years of Confederation, and whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. And welcome back to the show. Let's begin on line number 5. Good morning, Clarence. You're on the air. Good morning, Clarence. On 5. Yes, sir. You're on the air.
Yes. 75 years with Canada, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I don't remember much of that. I was born in 46, but I know my parents, Tom and April Malloy, Bush, of course, out didn't vote for Confederation. But I'm sure that it was the right thing. It was the right choice. But I think,
Well, I mean, no one really knows, because if you look back to 1949 and you look what the options would be, there was huge debt to be paid. The Brits pretty much didn't want us anymore. It has come at a cost, and I think most significantly inside the industry that is the fishery. But, what would have been our future? Would it be as a standalone nation? Unlikely. Would we be Americans? Probably not. Would we remain part of the British Empire, so to speak? Who knows? But the relationship has been tattered. Canada's not perfect, but it seems to me that if you look at a comprehensive review of 75 years, the upside is there. But again, nothing's perfect. We have a very regional approach to Confederation in this country. Life in politics is vastly different from east to west. But yeah, if you consider the fishery implications, there's a legitimate concern with how Canada has grossly mismanaged it.
Oh yes, yeah, but it's funny. There's some people. There was a lot of people for Confederation, but it must be it was voted in. But I can remember down in Eichelford, my wife's parents, Alfred and Brian Mardy, were all for Confederation, and they voted for it. But and I can remember Al's uncle and his great uncle, Howard, he used to always say that he carried the flag for Joey Small, in a parade or something that they had for when they were trying to, promote Confederation, But I also wanted to wish my wife a happy birthday today. She was born April the 1st, 1949. So I guess she's a Confederation baby.
How about that? Happy birthday to her.
And Mar Malloy. So 75 years today, and that's when she was born, April the 1st, 49. So I just wanted to wish her a happy birthday, and we're here with family and friends here.
Well, I hope all is well, and we want to send our big happy birthday wishes to her as well, Clarence. Appreciate the time this morning.
Okay, thanks, Pat.
Take good care. All right, bye-bye. And, of course, there's still debate about the veracity of the vote results and all sorts of moving targets regarding the conversation regarding 75 years of Confederation. Let's see here. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Hi. Just a first-time caller, so I am a little bit nervous here.
You just take your time. Go ahead.
I'm calling. I guess I'm so frustrated with workers' compensation, and it's not for myself. I'm speaking, I guess, on behalf of a family member who went on workers' compensation back in September of 22, went through all the rigmarole of chiropractor, physio, saw a neurosurgeon, had a CAT scan done, suggested an MRI. MRI hasn't taken place. Thank God this week past we did get an appointment for May month. The only thing was the end of January, workers' compensation cut the person off, no income whatsoever. The doctor is still filling out the forms saying this person is not able to work right now due to a workplace injury. Had to give up an apartment. Not sure where that person is going to go to live. They've took everything they've had from them. I'm just so frustrated, don't know where to start. Just wondering if there's anyone. I have called a few places with no answers back. Is there anyone who've ever come into this situation? I'm sure there must be people who've ran into this before, and just looking out there if there's anyone with any help or any names they could give me that I could contact on behalf of this family member to see where we stand, or is there, something that can be done?
So, for starters, it's as fundamental as the person was simply cut off of workers' comp.
Yeah.
Okay. So you say you've reached out to several people. People like who? You don't need to give names, just like politicians or?
I've left with MHA. I've left some messages there. I didn't get no return. And I understand, too, that it was coming up into Easter week. There was a couple friends of mine gave me a couple names, but no phone numbers. So, I don't know how to reach these people. like there must be some kind of advisor or workers' advisor or advocate for workers' camp. I'm thinking maybe not. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm not so sure you're going to have much luck with a politician necessarily, because, and you know, in the reality, I don't think we really want politicians to have a whole lot to say about who gets compensation or what have you. But there is an appeals process.
Yes, they did send me, it's called internal appeal. So we got all that filled out, hasn't heard anything back. And I said, that's fine if you have to appeal it, but what do this person do in the meantime for income? Nothing. I went a step further, and on February the 8th or 9th, I said, okay, why not try for income support? At least they might be able to help you with your rent. We did that, went through all the things, filled out did the application over the phone, all the paper, and I mean paperwork, stacks of it that had to be accumulated to bring to them. Did all that, still no response. So this weekend, Easter weekend, packed up all the belongings that they can do and come out of their apartment. Maybe they're going to live in their vehicle. I am not sure, but it's very frustrating.
Yes, I understand that. And, you know, it's important to note that an appeal at workers' comp is an internal review, and it's not really what they call a second look at the entirety of the claim. It's simply whether or not there was oversights or errors made in the initial decision. So those, I think those are important points to include in that appeals process at comp. Other than the appeals approach, and lots of people have had plenty of problems with workers' compensation, there's a backlog for appeals to be heard, and they're not meeting the timelines as set forward by themselves. But other than the appeal process, I wouldn't know where to point you, to be honest.
Okay.
And I wish I did. If anyone connects with us, say that this person or that person was really quite helpful. There used to be a couple of folks who were very vocal advocates in helping people with their claims at workers' comp. I haven't heard from either of them in quite a long time, number of years as a matter of fact. But if anyone reaches out to me, we have your number. Myself or Dave will get back to you.
I appreciate that very much, and thank you for my time.
You're welcome. Stay in touch.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, in honor of David Williams being back in the show, let's get to the breakdown time. When we come back, Michael, you're next to talk about the Easter Rising. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Michael. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, Paddy, I thought I would just mention to you today is a very important day, is the anniversary, the 108th anniversary of the Easter Rising, and it'll be celebrated in St. John's today at 12 noon at the Colonial Building. And I thought I'd just mention very quickly the three themes. There's a lot of things that we have in common, and one of the things in Newfoundland and in Canada is our right of assembly, and very important. We never forget that. And we'd like to sort of, this particular ceremony, to remember the people who died, all of the people who died in 1916, and that includes the Newfoundlanders who fought in Europe. And as well, there's something different this time. We're going to reach out to members of the Palestine community, and people from Ukraine. So there's a lot of things that we have in common. I think you would agree with that.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, it's an anniversary that falls on Easter Monday, but in 1916, it was on the 24th of April began the Easter Rising, which lasted some 6 days. Almost 500 people were killed. And, of course, you know, the Irish Republicans fighting back against British rule. And pretty devastating 6 days in that country's history.
Yeah, and we're just coming after Easter, and you know we hear people talking about in terms of suffering, and I'm wondering today how many religious leaders and many politicians will show up. We talk about the suffering going on in Gaza. You know, suffering going on. You know, and what are we doing about it? And Burma and Ukraine. You know, we have a right of assembly to make our voices known to politicians. You wonder where they're at sometimes, type of thing like that. But we're going to make it an event that we have Lee Brockerville as a gentleman who's going to a well-known singer of Kilkenny Crew. He's going to read the proclamation, and I think he's going to sing a song. And lastly, so we're remembering, reaching out and respect. The other thing is we have to think of people abroad, but we've got people next door to us. So anyone coming down this afternoon, bring a coffee, bring something down to the homeless people. The homeless people right beside us. We talk about suffering. Where will the politicians be today? They'll be, wondering, checking in their extra 25,000, I suppose. But we'll be there. So I appreciate the opportunity for you to mention that to your listeners, Paddy.
No problem at all, Michael. And the suffering is obviously very real. And where are politicians, and where do they stand on some of those issues that you mentioned? Many are loath to dip their toe into those tumultuous waters for the obvious reasons.
Yes.
I'll leave that at that. But inside the world of the Easter Rising, I mean, it's a fascinating part of Irish history. And, people talk about when the Mercies Act was invoked here. Well, martial law was in place for maybe 6 months, I believe it was, after the Easter Rising. And many of the leaders on the Irish Republican side, they were all executed, if I remember correctly, the Patrick Pearses and Tom Clarks. And,
well, they were shot. There was only one person hanged, and that was Sir Roger Casement. And the reason being, of course, he was a member of the British establishment, and they also had charges that he was gay as well. So it's a fascinating Irish history, and we like to see Irish people out there. Irish people are good getting around on March 17th. We like to see. If you're really Irish, you'll be here. You'll be there today at 12 o'clock.
I appreciate the time, Michael. Good luck with it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Paddy. Take care. Bye-bye.
Michael. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 3. Daryl, you're on the air.
Well, hi, Paddy. How you doing?
Doing okay. How about you?
Oh, good. Thanks. Happy belated Easter to you and your family and listening audience and staff at VOCM.
Thanks. Same to you.
Not a problem. Paddy, I want to talk about, 75 years now since we went into Confederation. And which is a good thing. Everything has pros and cons, but overall I think we modernize and benefit for the better. But what people don't, a lot of people probably don't realize that Confederation started in Gander. And how it started, Joe Smallwood had a piggery farm here in Gander in the early 40s. And apparently you see the Canadian military always flying back and forth from Newfoundland then to Canada. And when he got talking to somebody, a buddy of his or whatever, the idea came up for Confederation. And then Joe Smallwood used to study up on Canada, used to read books after books after books and study Canada before lobbying for Confederation. And I just thought I'd just bring that little bit of history to your listening audience.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, there's so many different. And it depends on where you live in the province, as depending whether or not it was the dangle of a baby bonus check, or is what the federal government could bring to bear in Labrador, where there a vast majority voted in favour of Confederation. Specifically what the feds might be able to do with Goose Pay. So there's, it kind of depends where you were as to what was an attractive message coming from Mr. Smallwood about the possibility to join the Confederation of Canada. So yeah, there you go.
And I've heard a story of an older gentleman there recently. Talking about before and after Confederation. I think he used to get some kind of a pension, whatever it was. I think it was $26 a month. But when we went in Confederation, it went from that to $270 a month. So that's just one of stories like what you just alluded to. And so all depends on how people look at it, different things, different ways. And but at the end of the day, we went in Confederation. I think is all for the good.
Fair enough. I think that's the popular sentiment. There will be folks who bemoan the day of April 1st of 1949, and if they want to talk about their thoughts or concerns, we're happy to take that call as well, Darryl. I appreciate your time.
Okay, great. Again, thanks, Paddy, and all the best to you and the staff of VOCM and your listening audience. Thanks for having me on your show.
Anytime, Darryl. Stay in touch.
Have a great finish to your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Very quickly, and this is in reference to the lady who called about a member of the family being cut off for comp, and a couple of people, and I appreciate when people do some legwork for me and send me along some helpful information about the opportunity to be assigned with a workers' advisor, which are employees at workers' comp. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is I know that these people are there, but when you file an appeal, don't you get assigned a workers' advisor? Because that's exactly what they do, is help navigate the appeal process, the relationship between the applicant and comp itself. But anyway, you want to talk about it and help me figure that out for that lady? Let's do exactly that. Let's go to line number 4. Keith, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to drop by and a few points, masking and healthcare. I just don't see the reason to flip-flop at this point. We have a national alert for measles. We have 3,000 projected COVID cases this week. We still have lots of sick people. I just don't see what the benefit is to ending something that really should be put in place permanently, right? So, as you mentioned earlier, I don't think masking is the super long-term, strategy that we need to embrace, but we need something to get us to the point that'll sort of bridge the gap until we can, get air filtration upgrades in every public building. Because like you were saying earlier, we spend a lot of time indoors. And with the rise of things like COVID and different viruses, what better time to sort of put the same kind of regulations we have on drinking water on our breathing air, right? So, so I kind of confused as to why, you'd end a measure such as masking in healthcare when so many people are still so sick, and when we have so much emerging, research and evidence on it's out there for us now. There's no more speculating, does COVID, cause damage? Is it something we need to avoid? The large Statistics Canada report that came out in December should have triggered immediate measures in all public buildings, with the startling numbers of 2.1 million people still have long COVID, adults. It's not even counting kids. It's very confusing as to why immediate, measures aren't taken to slow down just that one area of damage that COVID is causing. So, it's very concerning. So,
But even that mandate itself regarding wearing a mask in a healthcare setting, they weren't even enforcing it. So it was basically a suggestion masked as a mandate. That was interesting way to say that. I really do think we've known long enough about what air quality means, and this is not a COVID-specific conversation, because a lot of the ills out there are floating around in the air that we share and breathe in public buildings, for instance. So when we thought that we should go put air purifiers in classrooms, for instance, which ended up being sole source, and that's another part of public procurement conversation we can have, but we acknowledge it to that extent. But that's nowhere near far enough. I mean, this really required national guidance, because building codes are indeed national for the most part. So I don't know why we haven't advanced that conversation. And again, it's not just about COVID. It's the seasonal influenza, it's strep, it's the common cold, and other illnesses that are floating around here. If we just talk about the issue regarding our overall well-being, productivity, days or time missed from work because of sharing the poor breathing air, then we should have made very strict attention to this a long time ago, but for some reason we haven't. We've leaned on the flimsy, we've leaned on the easy, we've leaned on the fundamentals like a mask and or washing your hands, or 6 feet separating distances when we shop, and all those types of things. Those were things there was no playbook, so that's what they dreamt up insofar as collective public health policies were concerned. But air quality ultimately is what it all boiled down to, regardless. So somewhere and someone is going to have to drive that bus and get at it very quickly. Because if we spend 90% of our time indoors, if you live in an industrialized or an urban setting, then not having indoor air quality standards legislated, then I don't even know why we're worrying about some of the other moving parts when we could really go a long way to being more healthy and well if we just deal with the air quality. Just think about it. It proved to be very safe to travel on an aircraft. Why? Because of the best HEPA air filter system that you can put in one of those aircraft. Consequently, people weren't sharing the same poor air that we were all breathing. Why haven't we done that elsewhere? It's anybody's guess.
Yes, I mean, it's, it all plays into a missed opportunity, right? So, like you said, it's, it should have dawned on us decades ago that clean air is vital to, production, right? Because it's what it all comes down to. No matter what environment it is, if it's the school environment, if it's the hospital environment, it's production. It's keeping people healthy so that they can do the jobs or fill the roles or whatever they need to do, right? So, like our pillars of advocacy right now are education, mitigation. So the mitigation part, hopefully at some point we can just get rid of it, like you said. Until we upgrade, and have, universal standard air quality. I mean, there's studies, and COVID aside, there's studies that show that dirty air in a classroom stunts brain growth, like slows down the learning process. It adds to the inability of students to learn and concentrate. So if you take just that one variable and you focus on it, I mean, you can improve everything, right? So then we're seeing other things and other studies coming out, and it's some of this is COVID specific, and other parts of it are just like you said, it's clean air, right? So we have reports coming out from NLTA talking about 40% projected increase in violent incidents. So unfortunately, there's a lot of studies coming out over the last month, and a lot of papers coming out that shows that COVID can cause long COVID in young people, and the brain fog that people are actually reporting and feeling and sustaining is actually minor brain damage, right? So you have a group of people who are in pretty small quarters. If it's a very compact area classrooms are, and they're very with the rising numbers of kids in classes. So right now what's turning the education system is turning into a place where you have a bunch of people who are repetitively sick. Like you said, we need better air quality. There's nothing to slow down these sicknesses, and inconsistency is off the charts. Because if you have teachers who are in and out with various illness, and you have kids who are in and out with various illnesses or various absences or whatever the reasons, the consistency of the environment breaks down. And when that happens, if you couple that with rampant illness and like I said, literal brain damage, like there's massive studies out on this. So if you have a lot of people who are suffering from brain fog and not able to, the cognitive process is hindered, and just think about when anybody's sick. If you're sick with just the, they call it the man cold, people are irritable. People aren't easy to deal with. People have a difficult time handling, most situations. So if you're sick with these type of viruses, like COVID, and you have, a revolving door of illness, and people are missing lots of time, and there's inconsistency, and they're running out of, substitute teachers, and all of that stuff is going on, you can only expect that, violent incidents and absentee rates are going to continue to climb. Right. So if you look at what did we add to the picture? OK, we had a pandemic, and yes, there was some form of, relaxation when it came to, going to school or whatever. But we added a virus that is infecting people in record numbers for the last 2 years. We have different levels of other viruses off the charts. We have reemergence of measles and whatnot. And like you said, we have an issue of air that's probably not as clean as it needs to be. We can only expect these issues in schools and in other workplaces, right? So, but specifically for its schools, because it's been on the hot burner lately, there's a study out of New Zealand that shows that teachers are the number one most at risk for long COVID. So with our numbers in Canada projected to keep climbing because every wave of infection leaves behind more people with long COVID, we can only expect these problems to grow. So when I see masks come out of healthcare, it's, like you said, it wasn't enforced. And that goes back to this, it seems like lately we're having a real inability to educate the public on things that with the use of social media could be done so easily. And I'd like to see more mitigating strategies in place so that we bring down the levels of absences in schools and, sick time for hospital workers and everything else, instead of going in the other direction and just, nope. Well, and, numbers are slightly down. We're only down to 3,000 COVID cases this week. So let's end something that could benefit us in the long run, right? Because most of these mitigating strategies like masks and isolating and things like that, they don't work if you only do them for a few weeks. It has to be a culture shift, right? And hopefully the culture shift would be you use masks and you use these temporary things until you can get in and put in those state-of-the-art air things. And again, it's all going to have to be with the mindset of any money we spend right now, because it's going to have to take a lot of money, is going to be an investment to save way more money down the road, because there isn't just, a warehouse full of fresh nurses just ready to work, and doctors and teachers and educational assistants. We are running out of staff in all of these vital areas. And when you run out of staff and when you, break away from consistency, then what you have is, issues like violent incidents, rising, right? So, yeah.
I appreciate the time, Keith. I'm late for the break, but thank you.
No problem, Patty. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, let's take that break. There was a call last week, because there's a lot of concerning issues that we rightfully should be talking about, but there's also plenty of good stuff happening. There was a call last week called to congratulate this lady named Leanne Dupree for bringing knitting classes into the school in Botwood, and just what a big hit it's been. Leanne's in the queue, and also George is there to talk about the National Dental Plan. Took away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 5. Good morning, Leanne Dupree. You're on the air.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good. Thank you. I heard you were looking for me.
Yeah, sort of. Well, this lady called last week to congratulate you for what you're doing in the classrooms in Botwood, and you've brought knitting into the classrooms, which I think might indeed be a dying art. Usually, one time was really quite popular. Every house you went into, someone was clacking the needles. But why did you start doing this in the first place?
Well, I retired about 3 years ago, early from teaching. I'm a retired teacher, and moved to Newfoundland from Northern Ontario. And in the last 3 years, I've kind of missed this connection with kids. And I also knit for Nonia, and I've been knitting since I was 4 years old, and it's one of my passions. And so I reached out to a few places, and I reached out to the church here, the Catholic Church in town, and asked if they'd help me out to offer crochet classes for kids, and for free. And so the church lent me their space, their hall, and off we went. I made a few posts on Facebook and had some kids come in. And from that, we went to an adult class.
For me, now, I've never done any knitting and or crocheting. My wife is really quite good at crochet, but it looks daunting. So when, maybe for children, for instance, who are just sponges and seem to be able to pick up things much more quickly than, say, someone my age, what was the initial reaction? Were they all quite keen and interested to start knitting? Were some of them thinking that, oh, I can't do this? Or what kind of reaction did you get in the beginning? And then we'll talk about how successful it's been.
Oh, the kids were very excited. They came in. They weren't shy at all, and they grabbed those knitting needles. I showed them once, and they were at it on their own. They, like you said, they're sponges. They picked it up really quickly. The adults, on the other hand, some of them were quite fast. Others took a few more times, a bit more practice to get it well done, I guess. But no, it was all good. And actually, the first day the kids came in, the first class was what was it? It was, we received ashes. It was an Ash Wednesday Mass, but it was a Sunday because the Wednesday there was a storm. But anyway, the first class, we all had, myself and my helpers, we all had big black crosses on our foreheads. So the first thing they actually did was, what's on your forehead? So after that, the knitting came, and they didn't stop. And then from there, they started a little knitting group at school at lunchtime. The vice principal messaged me and asked me if I'd drop in one day to see this, because a few of the girls brought in their knitting to school at lunch and started teaching the other kids that are interested. And so I did. I went to the school, and it was a great little group, a great time.
I don't know much about knitting, to be honest, but if I remember correctly, for people who are new to knitting, the easiest way to learn is with the real big, thick, chunky wool and the big, thick needles. Does that present a problem for the little hands of children that are in the classroom, or did you start with just a thinner needle because they were small?
Oh, I provided them with the yarn and needles and everything, so they didn't get the big, thick, chunky needles or yarn. They got the regular stuff. But with the kids, I'd say just shorter needles would be better because they have shorter arms. But no, with their little fingers, they did fine with the thinner stuff. And they came out with headbands and hedgehogs and bags, dishcloths. That's what the kids. The adults came out with mostly dishcloths.
Dishcloths, yeah, fair enough. We use knitted dishcloths in our home, as a matter of fact. So what sort of knitting, I don't even know what the right word is, cast on, cast off, I know those two phrases, and one purl, this and that. What kind of knitting patterns were you dealing with? Or what's the right word I'm looking for with... Do you know what I'm trying to get at here?
They learned how to knit. They learned how to cast on and cast off, and how to knit and purl. And with knitting and purling, they're able to do some like designs or like embossed work in their knitting. and with that, they're able to knit socks or pretty much those are the basic stitches to learn to be able to move on and actually make stuff.
I think it's brilliant, and I'm glad to hear that it's been so successful. And you never know, this might be one of those hobbies that they have for a lifetime, because that's exactly what it could be. What's next?
Next, I'm just actually working on right now a poster for learning to crochet classes that I'll be offering to both kids and adults. Same time, same place.
And the kind of patterns with crochet are endless. Amazing.
Well, the adults, it'll be either a cushion cover or like a throw, and the kids will a little bit more fun, a water bottle holder, a positive potato, a disc. They'll both be doing dishcloths. The dishcloth is the easiest way to learn.
I really appreciate the time, Leanna. Thanks for joining us on the program, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
That's, one of those little hobbies. You never know. Some of those young knitters, they might be knitting well into their senior years now. There'll be socks in their grandchildren's stocking every Christmas. Let's take a break. When we come back, George, you're next to talk about the National Dental Plan. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 1. George, you're on the air.
Yes. Good morning, Barry.
Morning to you, sir.
The Canadian Dental Care Plan.
Yeah.
I picked the day now. This is a good day to pick it, April Fool's Day, because I don't think we're going to be fooled by this, and we could be.
What do you mean by that?
Because I'm eligible for it, and I went to my dentist there the other day, and I was speaking to him about it. I said, Sunlight is going to send out a card to me now in the next 3 weeks. And I said the program starts in May. He said, we're not having nothing to do with that, George. He said, because he said the government are not giving out all the full details to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador yet. The 100%, he said, there's no 100%, he said, going to be in that dental plan. But it says on the letter I got, it will pay up to 100%.
Yeah, on some things it will, and others it won't. We actually had the president of the province's dental association on talking about some of the concerns from dentists or hygienists or denturists or what have you. So there are some distinct gaps in it. And of course, we don't even know if it's going to roll out properly in May anyway, because like your dentist is not going to participate because they say, number one, it won't cover all their costs. Number two, it adds a huge administrative burden to their office operations. So that's the big looming question is, not only what will be covered, but whether or not your dentist is actually going to take on patients and cover them under the plan.
So can the dentists, to the people that are their customers, can they turn them down, say, no, we're not taking that Sunlight card?
Apparently so.
Yeah, they can. Oh, very good.
Yeah, so this...
No, I thought it was mandatory from they had to do it because it was put up by government, but I don't say they had because the doctors, so they're not even getting their own patients now.
That's going to be part of the problem here, is your current dentist may not enroll to be part of this plan. Consequently, you won't get that type of coverage, which is obviously a concern. Now, there's also been a staggered portal opening here. They started with seniors who were 87 years of age and older, and then in March moved back to seniors 70 to 71. Next month, it's going to be seniors 65 to 69, I'm pretty sure. And then every eligible Canadian will be covered by the start of 2025.
Okay, yeah, okay, very good. That's all. I just only want to put it out there. That's all. That's somebody else might have their concerns about it, but
yeah,
it looks good on paper, but probably we're going to be fooled again by some things around it.
Well, whether or not your dentist is actually going to sign up is a majorly concern that people are going to have to broach, but there's lots of things that will be covered. So what do they call the scaling or the cleanings will be covered, and fluoride services and diagnostics like x-rays will be covered, fillings will be covered, root canal treatments will be covered, dentures, partial removable dentures, extractions, things like that, they will be covered in this plan, but that all just requires your dentist to enroll to be part of it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had a dental insurance, and then when I turned 70, I worked at construction all my life. Once I turned 70, my dental was gone, and they took my dental away and took my glasses away when I turned 70 years old.
I appreciate the time this morning, George. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. there's also confusion remaining about exactly who's eligible. Because if you have private insurance, apparently you are not eligible. Now, they did come forward with some exemptions, but those exemptions you had to be aware of back in November of last year to absolutely be inside of that covered bubble. But put it this way, if you have your own private insurance, that does indeed offer you an additional benefit like dental, but you did not check that box and you do not have dental coverage simply because you had the option, you might not be eligible for the coverage under the National Dental Care Plan. So, anyways, you want to talk about that or anything else, you know what to do. Let's go to line number 6. Mike, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Paddy. Thanks for the opportunity again.
No problem.
Sir, I got on there talking about addiction, mental illness in Newfoundland. Up here in Ontario, the Conservative government, Doug Ford, he's a premier that you can actually approach. And he's a big advocate for mental illness and addiction. And I just can't understand why our leaders in Newfoundland, you can't approach him. There's no way. I'm trying to get meetings. I'm trying to get phone calls. I'm trying to get conversations. And everybody at the front desk tells me to email a letter, and I've been emailing letters. And it seems like nobody in the Liberal government wants to have anything to do with me. So I'm wondering, can Tony Wakeham, the PC leader in Newfoundland, the opposition, I'm wondering, because throughout central Newfoundland and the small cities in Newfoundland, you think St. John's has always been brought up about addiction and mental illness. Well, we're forgetting about the little ports where there's not many jobs, there's not many infrastructure, and the epidemic is probably 10 times as worse as it is in St. John's. Over the weekend, I've had hundreds of people throughout Newfoundland send me information about overdoses, break-in entries, drug addiction, and it seems like nobody's been doing anything about it. So I was wondering if Tony Wakeham and the PC party can actually challenge John Hogan and the Conservative, the Liberal government in Newfoundland. What is happening? What is their plans? What are they doing about it? It seems like nobody in Newfoundland got a voice, Paddy. They're just on Openline, is on social media, but nobody's doing hard work. The Conservative government policies in Ontario, if you look at it, Paddy, he's on fire. Doug Ford is on fire. Bonnie Crombie and the Liberal government thinks they're going to get elected. You're not going to beat Doug Ford because he's for the people. So I'm wondering, can Mr. Wakeham, the PC leader, get up in the House of Assembly? Because I know I could never get in there. I've been trying now for the last 6 years. I've been 45 years of an addict, and I spent 21 years in federal prison. Nobody in Newfoundland just wants to even look at me. I'm up here in Ontario. I'm working with the police station. I got pictures of me all over the internet with Doug Ford, leaders in the police department. I actually go in the police department. They said I'm so valuable that I got 45 years of experience. And I work with these people. So I just can't understand why the Liberal government, what are they hiding, Paddy?
I'm not so sure.
What can we do about it,
I'm not so
can
sure.
You help me?
Well, number one, I'm not so sure they are hiding it. I mean, we talk about addictions and the lack of services, whether you talk about the amount of time it takes before you go from detox into rehab, and there's all those types of concerns. I've been on the front burner. I've had many a conversation about mental health and addictions with a variety of advocates and with the minister responsible, and I do hope that with this new facility currently being built at the Health Sciences Complex, that it won't be just new bricks and mortar. Hopefully there's a new approach to addiction services here in the province. There has been some attention given to it in the most recent budget, probably not enough. I don't think we spend enough money of the health budget on mental health and addictions, period. The commitment was to have it somewhere in the neighbourhood of 9% of the overall budget. We haven't hit that as far as I understand. So inside the world of drug therapies, there's been some additions to the provincial formula. Inside the mental health world, I think there was maybe $14 or $15 million for those seeking mental health and addictions services. They're also instituting some more mobile crisis teams to various communities. I think that was maybe a couple of $1 million, and there's a bunch of communities on that particular list. There is almost $1 million for harm reduction, a harm reduction team to be put in place. Then there's more monies for some of these shelters and services like Stella Circle and Gathering Place and otherwise. But I will agree with your summary point that not enough is being done.
Yeah, I understand, Paddy. Like, I see the Gathering Place, and, it's only a Band-Aid on a wound. Because I know on my cell phone from Marystown, from Grand Falls, Windsor, the epidemic is to the point that zombies, they're walking up and down the street. They're actually living zombies in the city, and it's throughout the whole Newfoundland. And this is an emergency. This is not something that we can come into legislation and pass $1 million and say, okay, we're going to put $1 million out there. This is a national crisis in Newfoundland. We're a small-time province, but we have lots of natural resources, and we have a lot of money in Newfoundland. I think what I'm trying to ask, can Mr. Wakeham get a big team together and actually sit down and come up with a strategy plan instead of just coming out with these little tiny bits and pieces? We need a national strategy plan. And I think Mr. Wakeham and the PC party are going to be a good thing for Newfoundland if they just step up, because everybody's talking about gas taxes. Everybody's talking about the fishery. Well, let's really actually deal with mental illness addiction. And believe it or not, if we start getting people treated, they could come out and be productive members of society where they're going to start building homes. They're going to start building roads. They're going to start building infrastructure like I've been doing for the last 13 years here in Ontario. Newfoundland won't give you a break. Ontario will give you a break. And that's what we need in the new leadership in Newfoundland. That's all I'd like to say, Paddy. Bye.
I appreciate the time. You know, Doug Ford has some significant baggage he's dragging around as well. I'm not too familiar with Ontario policies on things like mental health and addictions, but certainly with the housing scandal and the Crown Lands issue that he's had to deal with, I think his approval rating is in the low to mid-30s, very much like most of the premiers across the country. But Crombie and the Liberals are still at least 10 points behind in these so-called straw polls. I appreciate the time, Mikey. Thanks for the call.
God bless you. Have a great day, sir. Thank you, and keep up doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Mike. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some concerns people have in certain parts of the province with phone services. We had a call last week where the person was offering, I think, fire services, and the phone lines were down. So, Daisy, you're next. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Daisy. You're on the air.
Hi, how are you this morning?
I'm grand. How about you?
I'm not too bad. A bit concerned. Not a bit concerned, a lot concerned. A small community on the Burin Peninsula, Brookside, has been without telephone service since March the 15th. Most of the community, I'd say 95% of the community, doesn't have cell phone coverage. The people may have cell phones, but they have no coverage at their homes. You'd need a booster, I think, for cell phones to work. People have been reporting the problems to Bell. I called, and they said that lines needed to be replaced. And they didn't know how long it would take. The technicians didn't have it updated into the system. My sister called. She lives in Brookside. She's called several times. She has a cell phone. They keep telling her it's going to be fixed by 8 o'clock that evening when they call. Technicians have been in the harbour about 3 times since the outage happened. People who've been talking to them have gotten different stories. They say a contractor needs to be involved to run new lines. Apparently, the lines that were used ran from the neighbouring community of Boat Harbour underwater to Brookside. And I don't know if this is right or not. It's hearsay. Those lines have been damaged, and new lines need to be ran to the community. Now, there's a residence about, 2 minutes up the road from the community that has telephone service by war, I guess, going to her house. They could connect, or from us looking at it, they could connect in there and run lines on the power line poles out to Brookside, so those people have telephone service. From looking at it, it's probably about 10 or 15 poles that they'd have to run lines on, yet nobody's working on it. And I've tried to find local numbers to call people to see if you can get an update, like tell us if it's going to be a month, a week, or however long to get the services repaired. But you can't find any numbers. The only numbers to call somebody is that, repair line, and the technicians there one technician, another technician, they tell you different stories and they don't know what's going on.
It's always the lack of information that is the most frustrating, isn't it? Because if you knew 100%. It's going to be 7 days, then at least you know. And when they won't tell you, of course, that's not only frustrating in and of itself, but it gives people worst case scenario that your provider simply doesn't care, and it could be a month, when in fact it might just be 10 days. So I always get confused with how business approach those types of concerns by people who actually pay their bills. So amazing.
Yep, but I'm wondering, I know sometimes when I listen to you, people call in and have trouble trying to contact someone, and however you guys do it, you find numbers for those people to call. I'm wondering if you could find, like, I've searched online, and I know their headquarters, Bell Alliant headquarters, is in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but again, you can't find a phone number to call there. I looked in the Yellow Pages, and there's an area manager number for Marystown, which is the next big community to Brookside. I tried that number, and it's no longer in service. I think that number might have been from when there used to be a Bell Alliant building in Marystown, but it's not there anymore. When I searched to try to find a number for St. John's, the numbers that are coming up are for the places where you can go buy your Bell telephone and stuff like that, but not like, you know, an area manager or somebody you call to find out what's going on. Like, is this, if it has to go to contractors have to do the work, is it going to go through the whole bidding process, or are they going to put some sort of priority on it so they can skip that? And there's nobody working on it.
It would most likely be an in-house tech that would be responsible for that type of repair. Did you just try to call 611?
Well, my sister has been calling numbers. I didn't call 611. I called a different number. But when you talk to those technicians, they just look at what's on the computer, and they're coming back with different stories. Some of them are saying it's going to be fixed 8 o'clock this evening, and some of them are saying it's the lines are down, but the technicians don't have it updated as to what's happening.
So I think 611 is an interesting feature that Bell offers their customers. So even on your Bell mobile phone, if you dial 611, that's supposed to be a tech support line and nothing but tech support. And also the obvious ones, if you've been calling all these numbers, for the Atlantic provinces, it's the number that ends in 7367. I assume you've called that one repeatedly.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's the main toll-free number. But just out of curiosity, try 611.
I will try. I will. I definitely will try the 611. But I mean, I think like the community is there's older people there in the community. My mother is there, and you know she's by herself there with no phone. And it's it's scary. What about if there's a fire in the community? What about if something happens and people can't get a hold to somebody needs an ambulance? You can't get out. You can't get a hold to emergency services. Like, they're going to be in some trouble if something serious happens, because the phones have been down all this time and nothing's been being done about it.
I mean, being cut off like that is concerning regardless of what we're talking about. Need for first responder or emergency services or what have you. You're absolutely right.
Yep.
And March 15th is a long time to go without something that's fundamental that you're actually paying for with your Bell phone service. Daisy, get back to us and let me know. Just give David a call and let me know if 611 was any satisfaction or not.
Okay, I will. All right. Thank you.
Hold on. Dave's saying something to me. So it's only tech support for your own phone, but that's what they're...
Yeah, it is. It's right.
So
it is.
Just so call 611 from a landline, or have someone do that. If you call from a mobile phone, apparently that's only tech support for your mobile phone. So get someone to dial 611 from a Bell landline. That should be tech support for landline services.
But see, the problem is for those phones, you can't call because their phones are out of service.
No. I mean, what I mean is for someone who's living in a serviced area to do it on your behalf. Like, you must have a friend or a family member outside of Brookside or that part of the Burin Peninsula that can make that call for you and be armed with enough information to see if you can't get an answer about timelines.
Yeah, okay. I'll try it that way. Yeah, I'll contact my sister and get her to do that. Her sister-in-law probably has a Bell phone. Okay. we will try that, but in the meantime, if you guys can find a number for managers or for someone who's actually living in Newfoundland, like I had one guy call me back from New Jersey. When I called the helpline, the support line, I asked, could I speak to his supervisor, to somebody who could tell me what the plan of action was. And his supervisor called me back from New Jersey. Now, you try to explain rural Newfoundland to somebody calling from New Jersey.
Yeah, not easy.
When he looked it up in his system, he told me the phones were fixed. And I said, no, they're not. And he said, yes, he said, they're fixed. He said, I'll try calling the number that you called about. And he tried calling Mom's number, and, of course, the phone rang, which it rings, but the ring doesn't go through. And he said, oh, yeah, it's fixed. The phone is ringing. And I said, no, it's not fixed. I just texted my sister. The phones are still not back. And it's like they I don't know. He looked into the system. He couldn't even tell me what the technician told me that I was talking to before, that the lines needed to be replaced. So
I'll see what I can find.
Sure.
I know some executives on the sales side, not necessarily on the tech side, but I'll see if they can give me a direct number for someone who actually has some authority and should be able to answer a question. Let me see what I can find out.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye, Daisy. All right, let's get to the break pretty much on time. First, quick check-in on the Twitter box. We're VOCM Open Line. You know what to do. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, Don's in the queue to talk about DFO. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's see here. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Don. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thanks for taking my call.
No problem.
Now they're starting to warm up and the weather's not too bad. I'm down Portagrave Harbour here now. Some of the boats are putting the crab pads on. Looks like some are getting ready for the fishery. But they got a lot to deal with. But now they're starting to warm up and we're in the spring. I'm looking forward to doing some of the stuff I like to do outdoors in the spring and summer. But this time of year, usually a question comes into my mind, Patty. So I walked into the DFO office a couple of weeks ago looking for an answer, but I can't find one. And my question was, now that people want to get out in the country more, some people like to go up there to the cabins or go on their bikes or whatever, have a boil up, and if they want to go fishing. I had a question for them. And we're over 20 years into it now. We're on the 1st of April today. You can go in the country still, trouting. If you want to try for a trout, and anyone wants to go in on their bike or go in their cabin, go down by the pond. But when the 15th of April comes, Patty, the season is then closed for 29 days.
Yeah, it's closed from the 15th of April to the 15th of May, right?
And other people have asked this question too. One of them is Gord Fowler. It was Gord Fowler and Dwight Blackwood. Operated the Newfoundland Sportsman for, I believe, 30-odd years.
Yep.
And as well had a TV show for 15 years or so. And Gord, a number of times, have brought it up when they had the magazine. And lately, Gord does a nice article in the Down Homer magazine, do with outdoor activities. And we can't get an answer.
Well, and I think there's only one zone where there's an interrupted trout schedule, right? Everywhere else, and I think there's 6 different zones in the province, but there's only in zone 1 where there's a 1-month interruption. The rest of it runs either from March or February right into the September month, right?
And there's that many rules, regulations. I can't even keep it straight. I don't even know if it applies to Labrador. Do you, Patty?
Pardon me, say that part again?
But now that the weather is starting to warm up, there's no ice on the pond, so you're permitted to still, you can go out on the boat in the pond now up till the 15th of April, or you can fish from the shore.
Right, as far as I know, yeah.
And that's inland waters, but once the 15th comes in 2 weeks, it's all closed.
Right, and so zone 1 is, I think, what they refer to as insular Newfoundland, right? Yeah, and then there's a different schedule for rainbow trout, different schedule for browns.
Yeah, and then, Patty, it's 29 days before you get to May 15th.
Right. Fair enough.
Baffling to me.
Yeah, I don't know why that would be either. I have no idea.
And maybe what I'll do, Paddy, as it comes closer to the 15th of April, I'll give you a call back again, and I'll go into a bit greater detail how this came about.
Yeah, and I'll see if I can get Gord to come on the show too to talk about it. Absolutely.
And another man that I've talked to in the past, and is Paul Smith in Spaniards Bay. I live in Bearneed. Paul's over in Spaniards Bay. And he's been doing a great article in the Evening Telegram now for, I think Paul said, 13, 14 years. And he's brought it up numerous times. And he can't get an answer, Paddy.
I have no earthly idea why it would be that way, but I'll see if I can figure something out. DFO is usually difficult to get on. You know, sometimes they'll be willing to talk about science and the data as opposed to the rationale behind policies like that 29-day gap. But I'll see if I can figure it out. There's something else that confused me with the trout regulations too, is the bag limit. So it's 12 fish is the daily bag limit, but there's also something called the possession limit, which is 24 fish. So which is it? I can fish and catch 12 trout, which could be all the different species combined, but I can have a possession limit of 24 fish, or I think it's 5 kilograms, possibly plus one fish, or maybe 4.5, some number like that. So I don't really understand the difference between the daily bag limit and the possession limit. Anything else you want to say this morning, Don, while we have you?
No, that's good. Barry, you bring up a very good point. A lot of people are very confused over that.
Yeah, that one does get me. I appreciate the time, Dan. We'll dig into it a little further.
Thanks very much, Paddy. Have a great day.
You too, sir. All the best.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. Yeah, same thing goes with some of the confusion regarding the daily limits for what is the recreational food fishery, of which I suppose we'll get some dates soon. We know that the petition that was circulated has been tabled by Clifford Small in the House of Commons. Whether or not that gets any traction, which would open it up dramatically from 39 days, what we had last year and the year prior, to I believe it was 90 days they were trying to see if we can have the adjustment made. Whether or not it's going to get any traction, don't know. But the daily trip limit thing there is also quite confusing, because they've long said 5 per person, 15 per boat. And we've got emails that show that DFO does not enforce that particular issue. For instance, if I'm on a vessel that can accommodate 5 people safely, apparently we're all allowed to get 5. But they never say that. They always say annually 5 per person, 15 per boat. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 3. Tracy, you're on the air. Hi, Tracy.
Hello.
Yes, hello. You're on the air.
Hi, Patty. The reason why I'm calling in, because recently I was looking at the Indeed job work site, and I guess I came across a couple jobs that were there for the city of St. John's positions, and a couple of them were garbage or litter collectors and things like that. And I looked at the wages, and it was like $16.90 and 17 something, and I think it's absolutely pitiful that a municipality such as the city of St. John's would pay anybody less than $20 an hour. I'm just here now, I'm scrolling through the sites, I'm looking at a couple of them, and most of the management or administrative salaries of the city of St. John's are really well paid in comparison to government and things like that, and that's well known, but a poor old litter collector and somebody else making $16.90 is absolutely pitiful for a municipality. And I just want to throw that out there. If you can't pay somebody an actual livable wage as a municipality like the city of St. John's, $20 an hour, something's seriously wrong. So that's all I really wanted to say. I think it's really disappointing that, there's so many low-paid jobs, but there's lots of high-paid jobs at the city of St. John's, and if they can't pay somebody $20 an hour, there's something definitely wrong.
You know what? In some respect, I'm surprised it's $16.90 and not $15.60.
I know that, but you know what I mean? It's just when you think of a litter collector, they're out there, and somebody mightn't put much value into that. But you're out in all types of weather. You're not working from home, so you're out in all types of weather. You're picking up needles and feces and whatever else and dealing with the general public. And if somebody can't rank a job to have higher value than that, because I tell you, I put a lot of value in the litter collection people in St. John's, because you look around and you see so much. and that's who should be out there. But I mean, to pay somebody like $16.90, and you're not some small business trying to make it. You're a municipality, the city of St. John's. You know, we're taxpayers paying millions of dollars a year. It's absolutely pitiful, pitiful, pitiful.
I appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
Okay, bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the PC member for CBS. That's Barry Petton. Barry, you're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Doing okay. How about you?
I'm good, thanks. Paddy, I wanted to call in today to discuss, as we know, the latest installment of the carbon tax has come official as of April 1st today, and which is extra cost on our, gas, diesel, propane. But it's an extra burden on the people of the province, obviously, and it's been a hot issue of late for a nice while, actually. And I guess on that note, it's something I wonder why it wasn't a hot issue for the Premier and his caucus for the last 3 years when we and a lot of others were calling out against this carbon tax. And I mean, Paddy, I witnessed it firsthand. They were in the House of Assembly. Quotes, if anyone wanted to answer, just quotes. You have minister after minister standing up and, the virtues of carbon tax. It's not great, but we have to. It's the best till we get this, and it mightn't be great, but we have to accept it. And climate change is real, and all the buzzwords that people around were saying at the time. And we were climate deniers, and actually they mocked up a video of me. One time I was in the House Assembly talking, they tried to skew it that I was against, carbon. I was against climate change, and it got so silly. I mean, they got called out, obviously, and they pushed it aside. But now, Paddy, when it's opportunistic, when the pressure gets on, you got a Premier of the province, he's writing letters, and I mean, I just read this morning on the USM site there, he wants to call all leaders together, and I guess my question is first, it's hypocrisy, but where have you been to for the last 3 years? Like now, all of a sudden, it's a huge issue, and we got to do something about it. When they could have stood up, Paddy, stood in their place, stood united with all of the, 40 members in that House of Assembly, and pushed back to Trudeau and the federal Liberals and said, no, we're not going to do this. We disagree wholeheartedly. There's no shock with the rollout of this. The layout of this carbon tax was late. So if you see it from the minute it come in, everyone knows that its price per ton increased, gas will increase, home heating oils, propane, diesel. This is not a shocker. It has been debated and analysed to that. But what it is now, it's the political winds are not blowing in your favour. I mean, federal Liberals are very unpopular. And you got a government there now trying to change the conversation, trying to turn the tides against the federal Liberals. He's in a little bit of a dispute with Trudeau. And anytime you fight the federal government, this always plays well in Newfoundland. And I mean, he's using whatever trick in the book. It's old-time politics. I said to you before, I mean, it's pork barrel politics you do on other issues. This is old-time politics. And
I get that concept, Barry, but two things. The Premier can't be in full-throated opposition to a carbon tax. Why? Because he and his government implemented their own provincial carbon tax a few years ago. Secondly, whether it be optics and or simply doing it to curry favour and for polling reasons or popularity reasons, the fact of the matter is that a large swath of the province, including your party, wants this carbon tax paused, this increase today to be paused. So on one hand, he's doing exactly what people want him to do. So whether or not that's simply to get, popularity numbers or that fight with Ottawa that's generally good in the world of politics, regardless, that's what people want, isn't it?
Yeah, Paddy, it would be more. It would mean more. It'd be more meaningful if he would have done it back when, instead of he's pressured now. This, again, your point, the Newfoundland approach. We debated that. I was a critic at the time. That wasn't affecting every person in this province. That was the money were going to the province in the Green Fund. It was hitting the heavy polluters. It was the big, polluters pay concept. And it was something that we all, no one likes any tax, but it was one of them ones that was like, okay, we're going to try to deal with climate change. Maybe this is a good first step. We never did believe and never did support a carbon tax in the way to combat it. But where was he to then? Like, why is it now? Now he's the champion. We called for this, Paddy. We're blue in the face asking for this stuff. We asked for motions for debate. We asked for emergency debates. We've had special votes in the House. One after another, we've done everything. We lobbied them one night in the House Assembly for the last time on carbon tax, so we got them to agree to give. They agreed then the $500 for every person in the province, and they took they reduced some gas tax. Little do people know that was a negotiation that happened between me and the government House leader and our former leader and the current Premier. That was a negotiated deal. We never got credit for it, but that's fine. I was happy to see the people got a bit of a break. At least we got some win at it, because ultimately they could have forced closure and got that bill bill through. But my point is, it's a frustrating part on our side when we watch these antics, and a lot of it is antics, Paddy. It's all smoke and mirrors. It all looks good, because the court of public opinion is not on his side. It's not on the Liberal side. Trust me. Paddy, I went down last week in Fogo Cape Reels. I knocked doors for candidates down the bottom. I spent the day knocking doors, took a day out. People at the doors down there in here, Bay, they're struggling. Are we going to, with gas, price of gas along with this carbon tax? This is a huge issue. And Andrew Fury knows that, like Barry Pinton knows it, and everyone else knows it, Paddy. This is a huge issue. He's responding to pressure. I get that. Well, where was he too back when we were... Everyone, this is not... The point is, this didn't happen last week, and all of a sudden he's took charge, and he's a fierce defender. This 3 years ago, I mean, where have they been to for the last 3 years?
Sure.
I mean,
Fair
to
enough.
me, it's the heights of hypocrisy. That's my point, and that's what I think a lot of people see out there. It's the heights of hypocrisy.
So your policy, your party's policy is not just to pause this 3 cent increase today, but to kill the carbon tax in full, for it to go away, right?
Right.
Okay. And so what would you do? Specifically, what would you do? Because I think the party agrees. What?
Yeah.
The party agrees, and Mr.
sorry.
Wakeham has said that the party understands the climate change concerns, and so something needs to be done. So what would you do?
Paddy, we've said before, education and technology is the answers to this stuff. You got to start at grassroots of that. Have you seen any less trucks on the road? You know, that's like the sugar tax. You see anyone drinking less drinks? No, instead of a 6 million product, now it's up to 14 million taking on a sugar tax. Educate people, Paddy. Start at the youngest ages and start educating people about carbon tax, about the use of oils, fuels, fossil fuels, converting the EVs, you name it. It got to start at a younger age, Paddy, because you know, like I know, when they start this in school level, the age when children are born, they're going to get educated. It got to start grassroots, and it's never too late to educate all of us.
Barry,
but you have to teach people, Paddy, and bring in technologies. This bit about punishing people with a tax is not the answer.
Just hold on a second.
They're giving it back to you.
Barry, the young people are much more attentive to this issue than older Canadians. There's no doubt about that. So I don't know what exactly you mean by education. Okay, technology, like what?
There's all kinds of... You're looking at the EV, energy electric vehicles. I mean, they've got a long way to go. That's one big piece of technology getting fuels off the road. There's lots of other technologies that you read about in articles about reducing emissions. There's all kinds of it out there. But my point is, we can get into that debate all day long. But if you're going to bring in a carbon tax, Paddy, you're bringing in a tax. You're taxing people. So what's the end result? You're punishing them for driving a full-size vehicle, so you have to pay more for fuel. So that's the punishment. Yet they're going to try to give it back and spend millions of dollars in refunding this back to the people.
Okay.
The logic's never made sense to me. Now all of a sudden that makes sense if you're premier other.
Okay, very quickly, because I'm way over my break. At some point, yourself, your party, provincially and federally, are going to have to explain a few things on this front. And this is not being in support of a carbon tax. This is just hopefully about a real genuine conversation about this issue, because come the end of next year, if there's not a price on carbon in this country, exporters into the European Union are going to have to pay a carbon tariff. So we've got to figure out what these long-term implications are. It's not just 3 cents at the pump today. There are other moving parts that are never being part of the conversation. Last one before I have to go. So through the Management Commission, they've been delivered a report now about the pay for members of the House of Assembly. Has been a pay raise, and I think it's some 15 years. The suggestion is maybe a $25,000 pay raise for you and your colleagues. Do you think that's fair? Do you think you should get that?
That's a good question, Paddy, but I'll leave that to, as a commissioner was appointed, the independent commissioner, she's made a recommendation. It's not even reached the management commissioner for debate yet. Whether you agree, whether you deserve something or not, I've long stated that I don't think that as MHAs we should be voting on raises. I don't agree with the concept. I never have, and I'm very public about that. So, to your point, is the commissioner thinks we deserve it, or we
Yeah, well, I'm asking for your opinion,
or whatever.
not the commission.
But I'll be honest with you, I struggle with the concept of us having any input into it. I think it should be independent, like judges do it. They bring in arbitration and independent, and they do an analysis and leave it at that. It's a really uncomfortable conversation for any MHA, I think, and me included, to tell you whether I deserve it or not. So what is value? Some people think we're overpaid or we're getting minimum wage, so I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that, Paddy, but my honest answer is I really feel uncomfortable about providing an answer, because I don't think we should be debating it. I don't think we should have that say.
But the process is not the question. The process is, will you accept a $25,000 pay raise based on whatever the commission comes back with? So if they say, yes, we're going to give you a $25,000 pay raise, do you think you should get it, and will you accept it?
Well, I guess one concept on that is there hasn't been a raise for an MHA in 15 years. and there's managers in government that make more than MHAs, and there's not many MHAs on the sunshine list. So to that regard, do I think that MHAs are underpaid? Probably so when you compare it to the rest of, you got an MP that's making well over $200,000. So on the face of that, yeah, maybe we are underpaid. But for me to be telling you I deserve something, I don't think that's where I found uncomfortable. But so, I mean, if that answers your question.
I appreciate the time, Barry. Thanks for the call.
All right, Paddy. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Barry Patton, PC member for CBS. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. All right, let's go. Line number 1, Joe, you are on the air.
Hi, Paddy. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. How about you?
God, I couldn't believe what came out of that man's mouth just then. $25,000 raise. He doesn't know if he will accept it or not. It boggles the mind. I mean, $95,000 is what they're getting now. Am I right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a fair chunk of money, boy. That's a lot of money for a man sitting in the House of Assembly for 39 days last year. And according to what I read online, that's going to be extended next year, 2024, to 49 days. You know, and the rest of the time they're in their constituency. You know, $120,000 a year is $10,000 a month. It's $2,500 a week. And if you break it down to an hour, it's $63 an hour. I don't know of very many people that are making $63 an hour. I really don't. For a 4-year term, for an 8-year term, for a 12-year term, I don't know. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
I don't know why they're... What?
There's a few problems here. Number one is that they're in a position of authority to grant themselves a pay raise, which is a flawed process, period. Secondly, when you don't get a pay raise in 15 years, and look, I don't begrudge people a reasonable rate of pay to be a politician because it's a terrible job. Secondly, if you just have that, just like the tuition freeze, if you leave it in place for too long, eventually when things change, there's a huge number and people will be up in arms. And that's exactly what's going to happen right here. So is 95,000 the right rate of pay? I don't know. Was it 120? I'm not sure. But the problem is that they get to vote for their own raise and they wait for so long that now all of a sudden it's a huge number like 25,000. There's people out there trying to live on 25,000.
Geez, yes, I know. A lot of people living on less. I mean, if everybody in Newfoundland was making $25,000, we wouldn't have Department of Social Services. We wouldn't have people we wouldn't have people living on lawns in tents. You know, seriously. I mean, there's 40 men that were elected. I mean, think about it, Paddy. They didn't just jump from the sky. They were elected by their constituents to represent them in the House of Assembly. And when the House of Assembly is sitting, they only sit for 39 days. According to what's online there, 39 days last year. I mean, that's only 8 weeks. If you just take into account, they only sit for 4 days and they're gone back to their constituency on Friday. And, you know, that's 8 weeks, and then now it's going to go to 10. It's quite a fair amount of money. I wouldn't mind being a politician making $95,000 a year.
You couldn't pay me enough.
I mean, seriously. But to give somebody a 25% raise, because that's almost what it is, just like that. I mean, I worked with the government for 30 years. You know, I had to go out on strike for 3%. You know, for 3%. And, you know, almost lose your home. And these guys are going to get a fair chunk. You know, sometimes when you look back, you wonder to yourself, maybe I should have been a politician. Because when... at the end of the day or whatever, if they're in for 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12, they're going to end up with a pension. But I had to wait 30 years for mine. And nobody's given me a raise for my pension that I earned.
Now,
I haven't seen a raise in my pension since I retired.
Fair. Now, I do think there is a legitimate conversation about being asked to put your hat in the ring, to run for elected office. It's got to come with some level of compensation that makes it attractive. I mean, so-called, some of the what would be great candidates, or I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, is if it wasn't financially attractive, And not to say $95,000 isn't, because that's a pretty good number. But if we talk about, cutting their pay and cutting their pension and stuff, at some point that will indeed have an implication about just what kind of people are willing to and wanting to run. Because some of the candidates, some of the people out there that I know that I would think would be excellent candidates and probably very good at governing and understanding the issues. Number one, they're not going at it because it's toxic and they're just under constant and sometimes unfair scrutiny. Now, we should be scrutinising them every step of the way on every single policy and or utterance, but some of it's foolishness. And secondly, people are willing to take a massive haircut insofar as their pay is concerned to run for elected office, given how brutal it is these days. But anyway, I'll give you the final thought, Joe, before I have to get off to the newscast.
I know, but to me, like even if they just put it up to $100,000, fine. That's a good bit of money, and I think that qualifies somebody to get somebody that wants to do something for their constituents, and that's $100,000 is nothing to be sneezed at. They can live on that, and they'll get a fine pension, and they don't have to work 30 years for it.
Yeah, 6 years elected twice.
That's good enough. What?
It's you have to serve 6 years, be elected twice, and there's I think.
Well, okay, fine, but you know what I'm saying, Patty? It's $1 million that you're talking about, and don't tell me that they're going to sit in the House of Assembly, 40 men, and say no, I'm not taking this.
Of course not. And then the members of Parliament. Then the members of Parliament get erased today. Then there's legislation that's trying to delay the next federal election by a week, which would see some 80 additional members of Parliament qualify for their pension. So, if they want to stop having people think that politics is shady, well, stop doing shady stuff. That legislation regarding the pensions or delaying the election federally is really legitimately pathetic. Joe, I got to get to the news.
It's scandalous. That is scandalous. Terrible. Anyway, thanks for taking my call.
Appreciate the time. All the best. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break for the news. When we come back, we're talking redfish or whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go line number 2. Cecil, you're on the air.
Heidi, the last time I talked to you, we were talking about redfish. Okay. So how did we make out? Did we lose the battle over it?
Well, nothing changed insofar as the numbers go. I'm still not sure they've announced the total allowable catch. They were thinking it was 25,000 tonnes. And at the last time we spoke, the allocation for this province was 19% of whatever the TAC will be. So that's pretty much where it stands. I haven't heard any changes.
Okay. Seems like to me the Trudeau and the NDP coalition has got too much control over Newfoundland resources. They're changing policies, and Trudeau don't even have a majority.
Yeah, I mean, minority parliaments have long worked the exact same way. I mean, it's not that long ago that the Jack Layton NDP, quote-unquote, propped up the Harper Conservative minority parliament. So this is pretty standard fare. Whether or not people like the policies they come up with is one thing, but insofar as process goes, this is pretty normal stuff.
You don't hear Jim Dinn. I hear him talking about the school violence and all that. But he's an NDP leader, and you never hear him talk about the cost of living anymore or the carbon tax because they support it all. They support the increased taxes. Now, in the meantime, this violence in the school is not the school's fault or the government's fault. It starts at home.
That's all part of it.
There's misbehavior at home. There's going to be misbehavior in school, and those kids is causing that trouble should be taken out of school and sent to their parents. But sometimes you don't know where the parents are.
Yeah, I don't think there's an easy solution to any of these things. People focus in on policies and accountability inside the walls of the school or the walls of the classroom. But the whole solution is going to have to include the entirety of the school community, including the parents. Absolutely right. I mean, if bad behavior is allowed at home, then of course you're going to think you can get away with it at school. Teachers and administrators have been handcuffed with how they're allowed to hold students accountable. So we've got a wide-ranging problem here. Throw in social media. Throw in the uptick in mental health concerns regarding the K-12 school population. So there's a lot to this. But
that's true.
Back to redfish
and
for a second.
It doesn't affect all students, but those that's causing the trouble should be taken to their parents and something done. You're not allowed to lay your hands on them, sir.
Yeah, I don't think laying hands on has done much, because when corporal punishment was part of it when we were in school, it didn't really curb the bad behaviour from the most notorious inside the classroom. But on the redfish, before we run too far afield here, the biggest problem with the redfish announcement is we know that there's a pretty sizable stock out there, some 4 million metric tons of spawning biomass apparently.
Yeah.
The problem is that the way they announced it is that we pretty much have all the boats required, we have all the processing required and the harvesters required to catch it all, but they added people into it. So we're actually going to have to build capacity to prosecute a fishery that we already had enough capacity in place. It just doesn't make sense. It's just trying to share the pie a little bit too broadly as opposed to what fundamentally makes the most sense.
Yeah, well, that's got to change, and the only way to change it is the next election. Maybe that might help.
Maybe. I don't know, when we talk about the fishery and trying to manage it from Kent Street to Ottawa changes a whole lot from one party stripe to another. It might, but I don't know. I haven't heard them talk much about the industry, period.
My friend said to me, who's involved with fisheries, it's a tangled web.
Of course it is. Yeah, and we still haven't seen the legal document regarding the agreement in principle about different moving parts, processing sector, outside buyers, and the rest of it. I really need to see that.
Yeah, I heard a lady talking about her operation, and she said that they got a plant there, and they can't. They're not allowed to process the food there, the fish there.
Yeah, that lady was talking about the fact that she could pay the $1,000 to get a buyer's permit or license, but that just meant that she could buy it and have to truck it elsewhere. She couldn't process it in her own plant. That's crazy. That was bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, good luck. It's good to have you back.
I appreciate the time, Cecil.
Thanks.
Or Cecil, pardon me. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, the redfish one, so I'm not so sure they've announced the TAC quite as of yet, the total allowable catch. But the big problem inside that is exactly what I tried to make sense of with Cecil, is that we had everything in place to deal with that particular species in this newly announced redfish fishery, which has been closed, I believe, for some 35 years. Why add to it? Why add capacity? Why add boats? Boats that's still yet to be built to actually be part of the redfish allocations. And yes, 19% is what's coming to this province as far as we know. There's also some of the lack of understanding about definitions of offshore. Like, does offshore mean the 100-footer, or does offshore mean the factory freezer trawler? Because historically it was around 75% of the total allowable catch went to offshore. Now it's 58% in this new agreement. But again, we don't have a definition of offshore because they're absolutely two different things. If I'm steaming out in Petton's Legacy in a 100-footer and I'm going after the redfish and bringing it back and landing it to see processed here, that's one thing. If it's another type of offshore vessel that catches the fish and doesn't bring them home to Lizer, but just simply processes them out on the water and sells them wherever, that's, two different things. We don't have a definition yet. Let's go to line number one. Say good morning to the Director External at the Memorial University's Student Union. That's John Harris. John, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How's it going?
Doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for taking my call.
No problem.
What I'm calling about today is on April 22nd, we are hosting, Munsu is hosting at the Breezeway, a second student town hall. So we sent out the invitations last week to the Premier, to the Leader of the Opposition, Tony Wakeham, to the third party, Jim Din, and to the president of MUN, as well as this time we went for the chair of the Board of Regents. So we're having a town hall where students can come and ask their questions about the funding for education, the funding for work terms, about the plans for the university, how they're going to deal with having the $68.4 million cut, and plus, $11 million is going to be unaccounted for. So where is that $11 million going to come from if it's not going to come from tuition or the government funding? So we're really looking forward to it. We've sent out our invitations. We're waiting to hear back from folks, but we're giving the leaders until Wednesday of this week to get back to us. But yeah, it's going to be on April 22nd.
So is that the entirety of the agenda? Is the $68+ million regarding the tuition offset? We all saw what that means. Went from about $22.25 per term to like over $6,000. You know, with the tuition freeze in place for some 22 years led us to this. Exact same thing is the conversation regarding the pending pay raise for members of the House of Assembly. We haven't thought it through very far. And you know what happened, John, and you know this to be true, is as opposed to being able to increase the tuition moderately or modestly every couple of years or what have you, what happened? They increased the fees. And what does that mean? Yeah. That you don't get the tax credit because you do on your tuition, but you don't on the fees. So we just kind of created a bit of a whip for our own tail here.
Yep. No, I agree with you there. I think that, you know, we haven't seen the university and the Premier's office or the government work together on these types of things. I think that there's been a lack of cohesion between the decisions that the Premier's office has been making and the decisions coming out of the university, where you've seen cuts coming from the Premier's office and fees going up, like the student service fee, $100 fee, like the campus renewal fee, which luckily we were able to get rid of. But the scope of the event is going to be very broad. It's going to be it's going to be about the increases in tuition, but it's also going to be about the cost of living in general for students and how that affects education, how it affects the future of our province. You know, I just keep thinking back to the Moya Green report, the PERT report that came out, that seems to me to be the nexus of this tuition increase, where that was the recommendation. And, you know, last town hall, Tom Osborne said that it was Timmins alone, former President Timmins alone, that came up with the idea to increase tuition. But from which doesn't really make sense to me, how would it have been only Timmins' idea if it was also in Moya Green's report that they had paid her so much money to do. So I think in that report it even says the young people have to be the future of this province. They have to get an education, and they have to have high skills, and they have to work and pay for the debt of this province. So what we're asking young people to do is to get a high education, to become a high-skilled laborer, to stay in this province. But we're also now asking them to take on a tremendous amount of debt to do so. And that kind of bargain, I just don't see that working out for the people of the province. I think that when you are forced to take on a lot of debt, you're in a high-stress situation, you're going to take whatever job you can get. And if that's in Ontario, then you're heading out of the island. And so I just don't see that being a sustainable way to grow the province by, you know, forcing young people to take on debt in order to get a good job, in order to build up the workforce in an educated workforce. So that's kind of what we're thinking about. We want to follow up with some of the things that were said in the last town hall, and we want to get some answers for some things that we still haven't figured out. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even the increase in tuition, and the government will talk about some provincial bursaries and grants that are in place. But again, not everybody's in the same life circumstance. If I'm moving into St. John's from Stephenville, then I have a different set of expenses versus someone who lives in their mother or father's house and gets to walk to campus. So there's a lot to, you know, how we craft these provincial bursaries and or grants. And if they were really tailored to different circumstances, as opposed to they're a little bit more broad, then maybe we could deal with the affordability issue. But no one's going to argue your point, John. The success of the province long term is going to have to be found through K-12 and post-secondary. It just is. The concerns people have about criminal justice and healthcare and everything else under the sun, the environment, the better we do in school, the better we do with all those issues. And it always is alarming to me that when people are asked about their priorities, education falls somewhere near the bottom of the top 10, when I think if we're really being serious and honest with each other, if it was our number one concern, we'd probably be all in better shape, whether it be financially or societally. John, give us the details one more time for the town hall.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's going to be April 22nd at 7 p.m. at the Breezeway Bar and Cafe, and we're asking the members of the House of Assembly, the leaders, and the president to get back to us, RSVP. by Wednesday this week. But yeah, thank you so much, Patty, for taking the call. And yes, education is an investment. I don't like the language that comes out about a subsidy. If it's a priority, I hope the leaders show up. It's a priority for their party. And additionally, I don't think education was even one of the main pillars of this last budget. I think it was totally forgotten. So I want to hear some more direct answers from the Premier on his plans for education.
I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Patty.
Thanks,
have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye. John Harris, Director External at Munsu. How are we doing on the telephone there, David? If you're in the mood today and interested to talk about either expanding on conversations you've heard already on the program, bringing up something you don't think we give enough attention to, today's the day. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. We're taking a break and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Trevor, you're on the air.
Well, good morning, Patty. How you doing?
Doing great. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. You know, I'm from Stephenville, and I just wanted to talk a bit about about all the road disasters, I guess, we had on the weekend, and really what impact the windmill production is. The infrastructure in Port-au-Port. And so I'm just curious whether or not the government is going to be starting to upgrade those roads when the transports start coming through, because those speed limits are very low, and the roads are in very, very bad shape. And as we saw this weekend, as more and more transport trucks go on those roads are going to erode. We're going to have situations like we had this weekend, and I'm looking to see what the government is prepared to do to upgrade it.
That's a good question, because when you have increased traffic, especially when you're talking about heavy traffic, it comes to mind all of the product being shipped in and out of Harbour Breton, and the road is so bad on that particular route. Same thing, I guess, can be said for the activity that we'll see a lot of heavy vehicles and heavy equipment have to traverse those roads. I don't know what the plan is, but insofar as this past weekend, that boils back to the fact that we now understand quite clearly that some of the old culverts that have been in place for decades are too small. They're just unable to handle the water flow that we're seeing time and time again. Just think back to Ivan, for instance, the hurricane. First thing we did when we rebuilt is we upsized the culverts so that we had a fighting chance.
Absolutely. And you know, Patty, I was shocked at the size of those culverts that went down there on Bruce's Brook. I mean, those were gigantic culverts. They looked to be as big as a house. And so you're right that in many communities we have these tiny, outdated culverts, and as we get more and more weather issues, that's going to happen. But, I was really struck by the size of those culverts that went out.
I suppose there's really no such thing as putting them in too big, but we've got a problem with too small. My thought off the top of the show this morning is, as we see them rebuild some of the roads, a couple of them remain closed, some of them are open to light traffic, but is it a smart thing to be put a preemptive strike, identify some of the culverts that we know full well are too small, and before there's a storm and the floods and the damage, replace them? There might be a better cost savings on that front if you prioritize them, or put them on a list similar to what we do with roads. 5-year plan.
And that's a great idea. I do have a lot of time for that 5-year plan, because at least you know what's happening. And so, it would be good for us to take a survey of all the culverts, particularly, in a lot of ways, St. John's and the Burin gets a lot of the major weather patterns, and the West Coast does as well. And those are really the ones I think that need to be paid attention to. And we can talk to the locals. I mean, you know as well, problems where there's bottlenecks in your own communities that can be addressed. It doesn't really have to take a whole lot of study to do. But yeah, I think that would be an excellent idea, that we got proactive, because this is happening every year now. We saw Georges Lake, we saw Little Rapids, we've seen all kinds of places in the West Coast that get completely washed out and separated from the rest of the island, and we really need to be proactive on this.
water's the unstoppable force. We see what it does, and I would imagine if we do a cost-benefit analysis, replacing smaller culverts now will ultimately cost far less than trying to clean up and replace and rebuild roads and people losing their homes. And it just pains me to know that so many people out around that area don't have home insurance. I don't know what they're going to do. I know the mayor's asking for photographs. They're going to ask the province for help. But boy, oh boy, imagine having to live through that over the weekend, knowing full well you don't have insurance for the rebuild. And boy, oh boy, that's terrible.
What a disaster. Yes, and that is a big problem in Newfoundland as well, is that a lot of people don't have home insurance. And so, I think maybe we need to have some type of public campaign to let people know about it, because in Port of Ask, that was a very similar situation. Now, the federal government stepped in and essentially gave everyone $250,000 or so they were all saved. But you can't save every person from every rainfall, and so as a result, we really have to think about changing how we live here in this province in a lot of ways.
I think the same can be said for fire protection. There are small communities, we've seen this happen as well, small communities that you couldn't get consensus for people to be willing to chip in to pay for fire protection services. And what happened? Fires obviously are potentially going to happen. And what happened then? No fire department response. So not only the one home that caught on fire is in jeopardy, it's all the surrounding homes in the community, because there's the thought that with the proper kind of winds, or the potential for the wind to jump the fire from house to house, is a big problem. So fires protection, I think, should be a bit more of a focus as well. Trevor, I appreciate it.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Patty. Have a great day.
You too, man. All the best.
All right,
bye-bye. And so Trevor mentioned he's from Stephenville and talking about infrastructure upgrades that might have to happen when the potential for World Energy GH2 comes to pass. And so just as a reminder, it's just over a week from now. It's April 9th, where we're told the government is going to give us some idea about the future of that particular proposal. And when we talk about road network infrastructure, and if things like, for instance, the fixed link ever happen, because people focus in on the fact that, whether or not it sees an uptick in traffic or economic uptick, I'll leave that up to you. But let's just say at some point in the future that someone gets that off the ground. Not to say it's good or bad, just as a concept. What doesn't get included in there is, we can talk about Route 138 through Quebec that needs to be fully completed, and we can talk about building the link and how much it'll cost, what the toll might be, those types of things. But let's just say for folks who are the vocal proponents of that concept, what would that mean if what they think would be commercial and or individual passenger traffic would see that massive increase? That would mean an absolute requirement to upgrade the highway network, specifically on the Great Northern Peninsula. That doesn't get factored into the conversation at all, because it can't be a wait and see, because you can't have the problem that might rear its ugly head if and when that link is ever built. And the next steps, of course, go to the market, to the people who build these things, get a better idea of forecasted timelines for construction, the cost, what a toll might be, because if you think you're trying to mimic the concept that built the Confederation Bridge, fair enough, but we haven't even gone that next step. Now, the federal Liberals did indeed include it in one of their policy conventions a number of years ago. And has anything advanced since? I don't think so. All right, let's take a break for the news. When we come back, plenty of time for you. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Eugene. You're on the air.
Well, good morning, Patty, and thank you to you and David for putting me on so quick. Anyway, we're at a demonstration in Lewisport on Main Street in front of MHA Derek Bennett's office, and we're demonstrating the gas tax increase. She went up to $1.85 here last night, and the rumors are it's going up again on Wednesday night. And it's got to a point we got to fight back. I mean, like the Prime Minister is saying, we're going to be better off because of the rebate that you get back. But I checked my bank account this morning. I haven't received mine. I probably won't get it.
Yeah, it comes out on the 15th.
Comes down to 15th. But, Patty, there's many people that won't get that. Depends on your income, of course.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't?
No, everyone gets it. As long as you file your taxes.
Oh, well, I follow my taxes and everyone does. So,
just out of curiosity, why select that particular political office to protest outside of, as opposed to a federal member of parliament? Because, of course, we're talking about federal tax here.
The federal member of parliament was there with us, Cliff Small.
Yeah, no, I'm curious why you wouldn't protest outside one of the Liberal members' offices, for instance, because we are talking about a federal imposed tax.
Yeah, but we got no Liberal MP here in this area. So this is people from the local area that's demonstrating there, right?
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, if the people in the Lewisburg area will come out and support, we know about the gas tax, and it's going to get worse and worse as the summer approaches. And we're in front of the MHA Derek Bennett's office on Main Street in Lewisport, and we're looking for everyone's support.
And just for people's information, last year the quarterly rebate was $164 for an individual. This year it's down. It's down to $149 in this province. Why? Because of the carve-out on carbon tax on home heating fuels, which is a 3-year plan. So family of four in this province, $298 per quarter, and everybody gets it. Rural residents actually get a 10% top-up as well.
Yeah, but we can't buy what the Prime Minister is saying. We're better off getting that rebate. I mean, Paddy, it's over $2 a litre here for diesel fuel, and trucking is the big thing here in Newfoundland, and for our freight and everything. And you're going to see it on your Bologna as well as anything else. I'm just using it as an example. And the increase is going to strike us really hard. And I mean, wages don't go up, pensions don't go up that much, and not enough to compensate for the increases. And, Paddy, I can get in the long term on this one. I just came at an Axford, and that area has 23 oil refineries. And our oil refinery is turning into a canola oil plant. I know it's providing work, but I tell you, I don't think the Prime Minister's run this country very well, and we're going downhill. And he's trying to shut down the oil refineries. He's trying to shut down the oil business and making everything electric. And I tell you, it's just not going to cut it. And we still got many coal plants operating around the world, and our country is not providing much of that pollution. I tell you that, very little, as we just talked about then. And I mean, what pollution comes out of Newfoundland, for example, when we're still paying the gas tax? And I think we're the only country paying gas tax, aren't we?
No.
We're not? Okay, no. Sorry.
There's somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 countries have a price on pollution, a price on carbon, a carbon tax, or a carbon pricing, whatever the case may be, however you want to call it. The Liberals have done a terrible job on even trying to explain what this does, what it means, how it works. So that's some of their own fault here. And when you talk about killing the oil business, I hear that all the time. To me, that really feels like politics, not policy. I mean, for starters, you and I are all in. We're chipping in on $30 billion pipeline. Last year in this country, record production, record revenue, record profit. So it doesn't look like they're doing a very good job killing it. And when you talk about overall taxation on gasoline, we're at 65 cents as of this morning in total tax. So whether the conversation belongs solely with carbon tax or how the HST gets applied, because, of course, first, it's the price of the fuel itself. Then it's the 10 cents federal excise tax, which has never changed. It's always been 10 cents. And then it's the provincial gas tax, which is halved. They extended that for another year. Then it's the carbon tax. Then it's the HST, all totaling 65 cents a litre. That's a lot.
Yeah, I know, Paddy. So, are you saying though that our Prime Minister and his government is not against shutting down the oil business?
Well, look, they have said very clearly, like things when there was approval given for Beta Nord, and Minister Guilbeault said quite clearly it's going to be much more difficult to get approvals in the future. So that's real, and the policies they have towards greening the economy are very real. My thought that is, here we are 9 years of the federal Liberals, and it hasn't been killed. That's all I'm saying. Is yes, they've got futures that don't include big expansions inside the oil business, but the facts are undeniable, and this comes from the oil industry itself, not from me. I'm not just plucking numbers out of thin air. This comes from CAP. And last year, record production and investment in the oil sands last year was huge. So record production, record revenue, record profit. Last year, there was billions of dollars in tax subsidies that went to fossil fuel industry. So, I get the long-term vision that the federal Liberals have, but the fact of the matter is today, the reality on the ground is not what the future is. If you hear them talking about or opining about greening the economy, the facts are just undeniable. That's all I can tell you. I mean, that friggin' pipeline, over $30 billion now. I mean, unbelievable.
So Paddy, under that topic, so why would Alberta be sort of dead against Trudeau and the Liberal government? And they have been for years now, because I've been back and forth to Alberta.
Why are Albertan Conservatives against the Liberals? Well, they always have been.
Against the Prime Minister and what he's trying to do with the gas.
Well, they always have been.
They always have been, yeah. They always have been.
They always have been. Provincial Conservatives in Alberta have 100% been opposed to anything that's not a federal Conservative government. 100%.
Okay, you lived there. I didn't live there.
I did. Yeah. I mean, just think about it. Even some of the conversations that happen sometimes out west, like, for instance, equalisation. Equalisation, as it's currently structured, is flawed. No question. And we've gone from a half to a half now. We're getting some $268 million in equalisation this year. But when Jason Kenney was the Premier of Alberta, they talked about equalisation all the time, and Quebec being the boogeyman. But the fact of the matter is, the exact equalisation formula that was being talked about that day, or those days when Jason Kenney was talking about it as the Premier of Alberta, he was a senior cabinet minister in the Harper government that created the formula. So sometimes we just have to sift through the obvious political nonsense to get down to the brass tacks. So yes, we can talk about the flaws in carbon tax, the structure of it, and the whole concept of rebates and all that. Yes, we can talk about the future for various industries, including the oil business. Certainly we can talk about equalisation, but just because a politician says it doesn't necessarily make it true.
I know. Anyway, we got 7 premiers now that's supporting the cut the gas tax. So isn't it? I think 7. So we got to be making some sense somewhere. I mean, we got to be, it got to be making sense that we got to stop that gas tax. We don't need that gas tax, and it's going to affect the people on the street, the minimum wage or less, and everyone, I guess. But especially people that's having a hard time to try to survive. So anyway, our demonstration is on Main Street in Lewisport, in front of the MHA Derek Bennett's office, and we wish to have as much support as possible because we're going to try to get NTV also soon. Okay, thank you very much, Patty. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Eugene. Bye-bye.
Absolutely, brother. Yeah,
thank you. Bye. All right, let's keep going. Line number 1. Anne, you're on the air.
Hello, Patty.
Hi there.
My name is Anne.
Yes, ma'am.
And last few months I've been trying to straighten out my son's affairs. Passed away there in October. And I ran short of some certain things I need from vital statistics. And one of them was his birth certificate. So I dropped in last week to get one. And I waited around about an hour, and when I got served, the girl was very polite, and she said, "Sorry, ma'am, but," she said, "I can't help you. I can't give you a birth certificate. The government does not give birth certificates to mothers." And I said, "I'm his mother, and I can't have his birth certificate." Yes, she said, "You're right, you can't have his birth certificate." So I didn't know what to do, and I said, "What am I going to do now?" She said, "Oh, by the way, if he has any siblings, they can come in and get it for you." Well, thank God, I said, I have one left anyway, and I'll get him to go in and pick one up. But it floored me, the hair that a mother can't pick up her son's birth certificate.
First, Anne, I'm sorry for your loss. My condolences.
Thank you.
Secondly, what does any of that mean? The mother can't get it, but a brother or a sister can?
She told me why, but I was so flattened when she told me that she couldn't give it to me. What she was telling me then was going over my head, and I was thinking on everything, And but she did give a reason. There's a government reason why it was, I mean, it wasn't her fault. She had to go by rules. But, I mean, what's the government after doing to us now that we can't get our own children's birth certificate?
You know what, Anne? It's the first I've ever heard of this. It seems really quite strange. I'm going to make a call after the show and see if someone can give me some sort of explanation.
Yes,
it'd be interesting to know.
Calling to see if you can do something now to find it out.
Yeah, I will try, no question. And what specifically do you need the birth certificate for?
I need it for DVA.
The Department of Veterans Affairs?
Yes.
Okay.
He's a veteran, my son was.
Okay. So, as opposed to simply needing a death certificate which proves that you had a birth certificate at some point, is that able to be the replacement if you don't have to jump through all the hoops to get a birth certificate, I wonder?
I have no idea.
Let me try to figure those two things out for you.
All I know is that they asked me to send in a death certificate and a birth certificate.
Okay. And let me see what I can find out, because that really doesn't make any sense to me. You're the person that gave birth to the child.
To the child, yeah.
So when people first get their birth certificates when they're born, how does it work then? Because I thought it was pretty fundamental. My children's birth certificates, we simply applied and they were sent, whether it be me as the father or Lynn as the mother. So I don't know why that would change upon their death.
We have one, but now the birth certificates now are nothing is allowed to be put in plastic, whatever you call it. You know, when
yes,
you put
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that anymore to any of them. It's a larger sheet of paper now there.
Yeah, you're not supposed to laminate that stuff. You're right.
No.
Well, I'll dig into this a little bit, because I'm not really exactly sure why that would be the case, but I'll see if I can find out this afternoon, Anne.
Fine, thank you.
You're welcome, and my condolences.
I'll be listening.
Okay.
Thank you, bye.
You're welcome, Anne. Bye-bye. Why would that possibly be? The sibling can get it, but the mother can't? Does anybody understand that issue better than me? Because I have zero understanding of it. So if you do, let us know during the break or right after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Well, I mentioned off the top that there's been a letter penned by the Atlantic premiers to the Prime Minister's office asking for clarity on a couple of pretty important issues. Let's start with infrastructure. And this is about changes to the Canada Community Building Fund. So it was a solid approach being taken by the federal government, but now with the proposed changes to that fund, they're talking about what is the resulting ambiguity regarding access to, or the federal government's requirements to access that fund, whether it be for provinces, territories and or municipalities. So people who are the various stakeholders are unable to be given any assurances, because we really don't understand what the proposed changes look like for federal requirements, which is completely unnecessary. It's one thing to talk about having these types of funds available, quite another for people to understand the definition of eligibility and access to. The same can be said for the Canadian Housing Accelerator Fund. $4 billion worth of funding for housing, but then you look at some of the entities that will be most responsible, and let's start with municipalities. It has been a rally cry across the entire country, especially for smaller municipalities, trying to come up with the human resources, the understanding and the wherewithal to compile the data that's required to fill out an application for the Housing Accelerator Fund. So that's a problem. There's also been the whole labour market transfer agreements, which have been extremely beneficial when we talk about the free flow of hundreds or thousands of people working in Atlantic Canada. So whether it be you're travelling to upgrade your skills, to find work, the potential to earn more, or simply trying to find greener pastures possibly, now we don't even know if these funds are going to remain in place past March. And so consequently, all of the providers of these employment opportunities and the potential for the employees themselves to have access to these support funds inside the labour market transfer agreement, we don't know. And so add that to things like National Dental Plan. The coverage is supposed to roll out beginning in May. We still don't even have a list of participating dentists or hygienists or denturists, and what will be covered in full and what will not, like a gentleman called earlier. His current dentist has told him that he is not going to enroll to be one of those dental care providers that gives their patients access to the National Dental Care Plan. Right? Add that to the universal pharmacare, which they're talking about rolling out the first phase now, which is the inclusion of all contraceptives and diabetes medication. Both areas make sense, and of course in a staggered approach as opposed to the one multi-billion-dollar price tag right out of the gate. I'm not surprised it's happening this way, but we don't know how it interacts and works with the provincial programs. We don't know, because we have some diabetes programs, glucose monitoring comes to mind. We don't know how it works with those particular provincial programs, and or how it's going to work with private insurance. Long been a confusion there. So when the federal government comes up with these big plans in place, it'd be nice for all these so-called ambiguities to be removed. Because what leads there is just worst case scenario. People's minds stray in the obvious places. So it's curious to hear if there's going to be any reply in writing to this letter penned by the Atlantic premiers. Add to it the confusion around what's included inside the cap on international students. We've been told by the federal government that they're going to reduce the number of international student visas by some 35%, which is a big number. And we were led to believe that that was as a result of the so-called bad actors in some of these private colleges, which are not offering an education that is really commensurate with what the employment hopes that you have. So that turns out not to be true either. Some of the biggest consumers of international student visas, because this is all about revenue side stuff for the universities and or colleges, right? The big takers of the large number of student visas have been public institutions, specifically in the province of Ontario. So what Federal Minister Miller was saying is not necessarily accurate. So all these confusions, we don't know what the cap on international students means for this province, whether we're going to be better off, worse off, stay the same. We don't know. Why? Because they've kind of changed their tune on how they're going to apply, whether it be weighted based on population or some other implications. We just don't know, and consequently, that leaves all those conversations up in the air. And as I mentioned, April 1st, extremely busy day on the policy front, whether it be knowing that the members of Parliament get a raise, the suggestion and the recommendation coming very likely that the MHAs get a raise, the carbon tax implication today, the minimum wage, which has increased from $15 an hour to $15.60, so a lot to build on. Lastly, I don't know what day this week it's going to be, but we do know that DFO, who initially resisted delaying the crab fishery for a week, have now said, yes, okay, we will. So that means this time next week, very likely, they'll be on the water and they begin to catch the crab and land it and sell it. We need to see that document, that whether it be between John Effort Jr. and data provided by the FFAW, which Mr. Effort said was quite helpful in those negotiations, and the conceptual agreement, or at least the understanding of an agreement, outside buyers, and how that's going to work and whether or not it's going to work, we'll all find out at the same time. The intention to look at the processing capacity, whether or not that needs to be adjusted upwards. And yes, the amount of foreign ownership inside the processing sector. And yes, controlling agreements were the fourth item on that particular list. Until that is put to paper and both sides ratified through their lawyers, then we've really just got a conceptual understanding here, or conceptual agreement. And so a lot of work yet to be done on that front. Let's check in on the Twitter box. Oh, there's a quick note out of the corner of my eye. We made mention earlier about public health policy, and not one thing was considered the silver bullet. But if we're really looking at making public buildings healthier, then we've really got to start going down the road very aggressively regarding indoor air quality standards via legislation. You know, it doesn't matter if you're talking about COVID or strep or influenza, the common cold, or anything else. The fact of the matter is the documentation is well understood. The worse air quality is where you live or work, then the more hours are going to be spent missing time at work. Consequently, productivity goes down, and including your own overall well-being. So getting to dig in a little further on indoor air quality via legislation, I think, is an important task. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. But of course, my favorite is when you pick up the phone and give us a shout. So just a friendly reminder that it doesn't have to be a topic that I put forward in the preamble. If it's something, whether you think it's small and insignificant, but it's troubling to you, maybe in a smaller part of the province or the country, that doesn't mean we don't want that on the show, because we absolutely do. All the way to the biggest issues of the day, we're happy to tackle them all. All right, good show today. We will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.